CORE, Citizens Organization for Rebuilding the Economy, presents the first in a series of programs entitled Economic Strategies for Trinbago in the 21st Century. In this, the first edition of the series, we will talk with Mr. Carlton Joseph, the founder of CORE. Mr. Joseph was born in Trinidad, where he attended Richmond Boys EC School and Naparima Boys College. He pursued his higher education in the United States, where he received his bachelor's degree at Howard University and a master's degree in business administration at George Washington University. While keeping one eye on events in his homeland, Trinidad and Tobago, he has successfully managed his own multi-million-dollar computer and technical services firm, OSS, Optimum Services and Systems, which has employed over 150 people. For the past 4 years, Mr. Joseph has been residing in Trinidad, where he has established his non-profit organization, CORE. However, he has also spent the last 4 years researching and analyzing the economy of Trinidad and Tobago and has met with and interviewed a number of local and regional economists who have appeared on his US-aired television program, the Caribbean American Forum. In today's program, Mr. Joseph discusses the results of this analysis and his recommended strategies for the 21st century. Welcome to Economic Strategies for Trinidad and Tobago in the 21st Century. I'm your host, John Blake, and with me, our guest, Mr. Carlton Joseph, who is the founder of CORE, the Citizens Organization for Rebuilding the Economy. Welcome, Carlton.
Thanks, John.
Let's begin with CORE, the organization CORE. What prompted you to start such an organization, and what is CORE all about?
Well, what prompted us to start the organization CORE was the fact that we saw the deterioration of the economy of Trinidad and Tobago and felt we should do something about it. In addition to the deterioration of the economy, John, what disturbed me was the lack of vision and purpose of our current leaders. They seem to just follow the dictates of the IMF and World Bank and do not question anything. They do not read. They seem to just, whatever people tell them to do, that's what they do. And I think that if they would read a bit, they would understand that they can use the industry argument to protect their own industries. They would understand that they could use different solutions to solving their problems. They should understand that if you sell all of your assets, it's like selling your house and then going to rent a facility. And if you have no money coming from somewhere, then when the money you sold the house for is finished, then you're going to be broke and you will have no assets to go back to the bank. You'll have no collateral to get anything else from the bank. And so the only thing that is going to be left for these people to do now is to tax people. And they are taxing people to death. For example, John, you know, there's the value-added tax. Well, that is the most regressive tax one can impose on a population. So it's going to leave people poorer and poorer. Devaluation. It's going to destroy the education base in the country. So there are a lot of areas, John, that I am worried about. And I believe that if we do not turn that country around now, what is going to happen is that we're going to have total chaos in the next 5 years. And we will never be able to recover from it. We will be in what economists call, John, the cycle of poverty.
How would you assess the current economic situation in Trinidad and Tobago? And, you know, in terms of where we go from here, maybe you want to talk about that a little bit.
Well, let's say the assessment of the situation in Trinidad and Tobago. I think it's a deteriorating condition and it's going to get worse. I mean, if you look at the rest of the Caribbean, John, if you look at Jamaica, if you look at Guyana, if you look at Barbados, they are all deteriorating. And for one simple reason, is that you cannot implement the policies that you are implementing unless you have an economic base. And when I talk about economic base, I'm talking about manufacturing capability, services capability. If you do not have that, you're just going to be destroying your economy. Mm-hmm. And that's the situation now.
Let's look then at what has worked. Some things must have worked, and something did not. Maybe we can look at what has and what has not.
Let's take a look. Let's go back in history again. And what did work? Well, you know, there's a lot of complaints now about the government having the commanding heights of the economy, like during Eric Williams' time. And let me tell you something. I know there's a lot of criticism of Eric Williams But let me tell you something. The guy had an excellent plan. Now, some people claim that the plan was forced on him because of the Black Power movement. Well, probably it was. But the fact of the matter is that he implemented it. And when he took over the commanding heights of the economy, that was the right thing to do. Let me tell you why it's the right thing to do. John, if you look at any economic textbook, I don't care which one you look at, capitalistic economic textbook, mind you, you will find out that in small economies such as ours, it is impossible when you do not have entrepreneurs, you do not have capitalists. When I say capitalists, I mean people with the money. You do not have the production base. You do not have the mass population. When you have an economy like that, government of necessity must step in to fill the void. And that's what Eric Williams did in the 1970s and 80s. He did the correct thing. Now that worked. And people say it didn't work, but I'll show you why it worked. If it didn't work, today folks wouldn't have assets to sell. And so it did work. The problem is that something went wrong. Let me tell you what went wrong, John. What went wrong is that during the oil boom years, some bad influences came into the political organization. They took over the party, they took over the economics of the party, and they actually destroyed the economy. So what happened is that these enterprises that were built were not built to create profit, but to keep their friends happy and to keep a lot of people employed without running a productive enterprise. And that's what should have been the focus. The focus should have been to make them profitable and make them profitable enterprises for the benefit of the nation, and not for a few politicians and their friends.
Mm-hmm. There seems to be a conflict in, therefore, what you're saying in terms of the policies that are implemented now by this present administration, moving towards privatization, using some of the examples, say, from the developed countries. Is that one of the focuses of your criticism, that the strategies are not going to work for developing countries that worked for developed countries?
Well, there's a number of questions here, but let me see if I can get them all. Number one, let me address the privatization aspect of it. I am thoroughly and totally disappointed with the present government, especially this present government. Because you see, the folks in this government, especially some of the top people in the government, belonged to Eric Williams' party during the early days. And so what should have happened then was, you would think that they would understand what this was all about. But obviously they do not. And so now they've gone to privatization, and they're following the dictates of the IMF, the World Bank, and the developed countries. Now, it's a very stupid policy because, you know, every period of your life, you need a different set of strategies. If you're a young developing nation, you need one kind of strategy. If you're an industrialized nation with a lot of goods to export, then you need a different kind of strategy. And so what we are doing is we're adopting strategies that just does not make sense. Now let us take, for example, you know, people talk a lot about economics, and they try to put it up into all kinds of realms in the stratosphere. Now one has to do is simply look at what economics is all about. You take, for example, anything in nature. A kid is born. You give birth to a child. That child needs some protection. After the child gets to about elementary school, there's a little more freedom there. When he gets to high school, there's a little more freedom there. When she gets to college, there's a little more freedom there. And when she gets married, or he gets married, then that's total independence. Well, it's the same thing when you build an economy. If you have a small business, you have to protect it. You have to nurture it, and you have to give it some protection for a period of time. And then let it go out and face the world when it has matured. We do not have any mature industries in Trinidad and Tobago. And when I say, now some people might argue and say, well, we do have Angostura bitters, and we do have Carib beer. Probably Angostura bitters is the only one. But we have Carib beer. Carib beer cannot compete outside of Trinidad and Tobago or outside of the Caribbean. And it's a simple fact. They just do not have the money to do it. So that's the problem. We cannot be following policies that just does not make sense for us.
And what is the answer then? To come up with our own hybrid, so to speak, maybe look at what worked with the developed countries and what appropriate for developing countries and come up with our own creative hybrid? Is that
exactly, John? And in particular, we have to look at United States. We have to see what did they do when they transitioned from being a colony of England into being the United States. And to just give you a few examples, you know, they reversed everything. They changed soccer into football. They changed cricket into baseball. They changed how you spell words. They changed the entire constitution. Then you have to take a look at Japan and Germany and see what they did. Now, after World War II, their economies were totally in shambles. So the United States came up with a Marshall Plan. Now look what has happened. That Marshall Plan was for Europe, Germany, and Japan. So now we have a starting point to rebuild your economy, which is where we are at, okay? So when you look at that starting point, you see that Japan is now a serious creditor nation. In fact, you know, Japan has a surplus with the world now of $125 billion. That's a lot of money. Now, you take a Germany. I can't remember the surplus that Germany has, but she is also a creditor nation. And in fact, the only reason that she doesn't have as big a surplus as Japan is because she absorbed East Germany. Now let's take England. England is still a debtor nation. So now one has to say, what worked and why did it work? And it's a simple answer. What worked was a managed trade philosophy and the rationalization theory. That's what worked. And some protection and an industrial plan. So that's what worked for Germany and Japan. England tried to follow the free trade especially during Margaret Thatcher's time, and totally destroy the economy. So what we have to do is come up with a hybrid. We have got to take the best from all the industrial nations and say this is what will work if it fits into our own culture. And in some aspects of our culture, we have to change it. People have got to become more productive, people have got to become more dependable, and people have got to pursue excellence in everything that they do.
There are those who say that, you know, countries such as the developing country like Trinidad and Tobago cannot survive without outside help. And we're talking here about the financial institutions such as the IMF and the World Bank. What is your view on this? Because what we have seen is that they have not, even with these loans and the restrictions attached to them, that they have not by far worked for most of these countries that are depending on them.
Well, John, that's a very good question, because you see, loans are good, but loans from the IMF and World Bank and the IADB and those other international organizations are not good. And I will tell you why. They are not good because what they do is they loan you money to perform studies. And the people who perform the studies are foreign consultants. So in reality, 90% of the money never gets to your island or to your country. And so what you end up with is a bunch of paper, a lot of paper studies, that's on someone's shelf, studying the same problem over and over and over again, and foreigners have all the money. So what you have done, you've borrowed money to keep foreign consultants employed. And that's why the loans do not work. Now, if you take the money and you built a productive facility, you set down a manufacturing plant, and you started doing some production of things for export, now we have a decent loan. But that is not the case in the Caribbean and not in Trinidad and Tobago.
Mm-hmm. Well, therefore, what we've seen also is recently with the selling off of industries and so on, the goal seems to have been, or maybe still is, to accumulate assets, well, in this particular case, money. Should money then be the goal? Are you disagreeing with accumulating this money within the country being the goal? Or should be the goal then probably be more shifted to developing efficient management of the hybrid policy you talked about?
Okay, now that's a very good question, John. Number one, let's discuss money. Money should never be a goal, never. A lot of people disagree and people do not understand money, but money is a result. If you have good policies, good products, products with quality, and you have good policies to implement and do everything else you want, money will come. Let me give you some simple examples in our society. If you go to the ball game and they're nuts selling, now we all know nuts is a very standardized product. However, if you observe what happens, there's a guy by the name of Jumbo. Before the game starts sometimes, Jumbo has sold all his nuts. What does Jumbo have that these other nutsmen lack? What he has a system. He has a system where he throws his nuts to the guys and they catch it. So he's created a little game out of this thing. In addition to that, his nuts are larger than the other guys. That's why they call them Jumbo nuts. Recently, I went to the cricket game. You know what Jumbo started doing? He started putting a toothpick and raisins in the nuts. So now he's gone way beyond the competition. No wonder he's not. I mean, after you finish your nuts, you know you're going to get something out of your teeth. The man is thinking, and that's what it's all about. So once you have the proper policies, the proper procedures, the good marketing tools, a good product, you've got it made. Money is a result.
I know that you have had a close admiration for the art form of calypso, and you have even been instrumental in getting some calypsonians up to Washington, D.C. for shows in the past. Should I then seem to think that you believe that the calypsonian and the art form as a whole has a role to play in developing some of these strategies for the 21st century?
Well, John, you know, that's a fact. The calypsonians, and people tend to want to discount them, but I think they're probably the only true medium with which we get proper information. In fact, you know, when I first came to the United States, for the first 15 years while I was here studying, that's how I kept up to date with Trinidad and Tobago and what was going on in the entire Caribbean. And the fact of the matter is that a lot of people, for example, you remember when Gypsy sang Sinking Ship? You know, people didn't understand what was happening there. In fact, Mr. Chambers got out and hugged him up and said, Kaiso boy, he still lost the election. See, so they undermine what the Calypsonian is saying. In some areas, you know, you take, for instance, Sparrow. Years ago, Sparrow sang a song called Capitalism Gone Mad. Well, you know, back then, capitalism had gone mad. Today, I say, I don't know where. It's gone totally insane. Because, you see, unmitigated greed was never factored into what's happening today. And so, if you look at America, what's happening is that you have people trying to make money with money. No new wealth is being created. People are laying off people all over, you know, they're forcing us, let's say, to lay off people. What are we doing with that? When you lay off people, any fool, John, any fool can make money or any fool can show a profit by laying off people. It takes good management, it takes good delegation, it takes those kinds of things to create a product and to also get profits and also to make money. So their policies are wrong. And when they finish hollowing out all these corporations, no one will be able to do anything.
Talking about that, recently we have seen also an influx of foreign corporations, and especially in the fast food area, in the region as a whole, the Caribbean region as a whole. Are you opposed to such strategy of having foreign companies come into the country and by so doing contribute to the economy of the country?
John, I have mixed feelings about it. Let me tell you why. Number one, it's good for a foreign company to come in and bring some fast foods or something, right? I'll tell you why it's good. It raises the standards. Raises the standards. So all of a sudden, Kentucky comes in, and a McDonald's comes in, and a Pizza Hut comes in, and you know something? The rest of people understand now what quality is, they understand what service is, and so it's raised. The problem I have with it now is that they dominate your economy. So if they would come in and have a few and just enjoy it like everybody else, that'd be all right. But what they do is they come in and they destroy the local entrepreneurs. So all of a sudden you get up and the big meal now is a Kentucky Fried Chicken or a pizza. And your roti is no longer popular, you know, and your shark and bacon shark and your saltfish bull jowl, and these things start losing space in the market. And we will never be able to compete with them because they have the money to do it. In fact, I'm glad you brought up that McDonald's, you know, the franchise thing. For example, in Trinidad and Tobago, McDonald's wants $5 million for a franchise. Now, they own the land, they own everything after you pay them that $5 million. So here you are, you've bought it, and you still have to pay rents, and you still have to pay everything else. And they want 17% off the top. Now, the other thing I do not like with it is this. Here they come, they bring their franchises, they bring their corporations, and they pay $5 an hour jobs. So low-wage jobs at $5.50 an hour or something like that. Low rents. They pay rents in Trinidad dollars. Do you know that the price of the item, like at Kentucky Fried Chicken, the price of that Kentucky chicken is not reflected in Trinidad dollars. It's multiplied by the value rate of the US dollar versus. So in other words, if a Kentucky Fried Chicken costs $2 in America, it will cost $10 in Trinidad and Tobago. And that's the ridiculousness of the process. So they gouge in the country.
We do know that you have started a college here in Trinidad and Tobago, which is a community-based college for people with vocations in various areas. And I'm taking a cue from that your focus is also on education as one of the strategies for Trinidad and Tobago in terms of economic strategies for the 21st century. Is that accurate?
Yes, John. In fact, if I could have two centerpieces, education is one and entrepreneurship is the other. Education, we believe, is totally necessary because in this new information age, if you do not educate yourself, there is no purpose for you out here. There's absolutely no purpose. And so we've got to educate ourselves. Now, we saw the community college as the link because if you look at Trinidad and Tobago, John, you come out of elementary school. And when you come out of elementary school, you are 12 years old. All right? Now, you know, there's the 11 plus exam. If you do not pass that exam to get to one of the top schools, then you might get to one of the middle high schools. So let's say out of that population, what happens is about 10% probably get to the high school, to the real top schools, like the Presentation and QRC and St. Mary's and Naparima. And then the rest, a lot of the other folks, and then there's a fallout after that where some of them don't even go to school. And then you end up now with the kids who come out of high school these days, they cannot even find a job. So what we have decided is that what is necessary now is a community college. A college that gives people the education between after high school, if you cannot get to the University of the West Indies, and remember that they can only take up 2% they only take about 1% of the population, if so much. So there's a whole big gap that's missing in education, and that's the gap we intend to fill.
Okay. Now we've got the Japanese model in terms of strategies that we're talking about here. We also got the American model, okay? I'm sure you would say that both got their pros and cons. What do you need to keep from those models and what you need to dispel?
Okay, John, very interesting question. And I like to combine them a bit because the Japanese and the Germans have a very similar model. It's not identical, but it's very similar. And the American model is a bit different again. Now let me emphasize the key differences that I think we need to look at. Number one is in the American model emphasizes the individual. In other words, the model says, as an individual, you have to go out here and make life on your own. Tough if you don't make it. That's it. The Japanese and the German model say it emphasizes cooperation between government, workers, and the employers and employees. And they talk about working as a team. So the whole thing, therefore, boils down to the team concept versus the individual concept. And John, you and I know that the individual is nothing in this world. I don't care. Let's take the Chicago Bulls, and I know people in Trinidad like basketball, and I know they love Michael Jordan. But Michael Jordan alone cannot win. The team has to win. And that's in the game of cricket. Brian Lara, top-notch batsman. Every day, Brian Lara is not going to make 500 runs. He's going to have his off days. So the team has to work. And modern theory, modern industrial theory now says team concept. So why are we, or why should one adopt a philosophy that emphasizes the individual as opposed to the team when everything else one does in life operates on a team basis? If you're in a corporation and you pull together a team, you have a good management team. What is a good management team called for? A good leader who delegates, who trains his troops, and who builds an organization. Could the leader just run off by himself and do what he wants? No way. The team, everything will fail.
Okay, I'm sure there's a whole lot that we can get into in terms of some details on your strategies, for example, to develop that whole concept about the hybrid. But time is upon us now, so we will leave a lot of that for continuation in the series. But we did get at least an idea of where your strategies are going for the 21st century. And in closing, I guess that you have some particular things that you want to share in your closing remarks to our viewers here. If we were to put this in a nutshell then, we're talking about taking responsibility for our own future and not totally depending on something that might have worked for others in other places that has a totally different environment. Is that maybe the total picture here?
That's the trust, John. But it's more than that. Because you see, what's happening today is that our leaders do not have any confidence in themselves or in the people. And so not only are they selling out all of the assets, but they're also bringing in managers, outside foreign managers, to manage our water, our electricity, our everything. And so there will be no development in that country unless we start looking inwardly for solutions. Solutions are not outside, and development is not taking place in that country as long as foreigners take care of everything for us. So we have got to stop being on the dole, and that's where we are, on the dole.
So our resources really is in ourselves, our people.
Our people.
Okay.
That's the key.
Thanks a lot, Carlton Joseph, our special guest today on economic strategies for Trinidad and Tobago in the 21st century. I'm your host, John Blake, inviting you to join us in another program, another in the series. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.